What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Panda here, and today we are playing Watcher of Realms. Today I have a pretty interesting topic for the video, and I think it might be a little bit controversial, so I'm hoping this kind of sparks some conversation in the comments, or just in general in the community. And the topic at hand today is, where should you farm? And I know that it seems kind of obvious, hey, you're looking at the gear rates, you should farm gear. And I don't disagree with you, but which gear should you be farming? Should you be farming gear raid 1, 2, 3? Should you even be farming artifact material raid? There are a lot of places that you can farm in this game, and I kind of want to give you my personal opinion of the best way to farm in your early progression in towards the mid game. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. So I want to do a quick sort of synopsis of what each gear raid gives you, because again, I'm more focused on like the early game, so odds are you're probably a newer player, and so I want to give you a real quick understanding of what each of these locations provide you with. Promotion raids is obvious, guys. It gives you the promotion materials you need to promote. This is a farm when you need it, right? This isn't even part of the discussion, really, but I wanted to include it so you're aware. This is where you farm your materials, such as your insignias for all 4 of the main classes, as well as your legendary and mythic extracts to promote them to 5 and 6 star promotions. Farm these when you need them. There's no sense in farming a ton of them just because. I mean, I guess if you want to, you could, but highly recommend just farm them when you need them. You may pull a mage and you went and farmed a bunch of fighters, and then you don't have the mage ones, so you have to farm them anyways. So just farm them when you need them. No real craziness going on there. You can also pick these insignias up in the store. I highly recommend picking them up in the store if they are on sale for gold, not for gems, only for gold. And so that's a good way to kind of build up a slow amount of them over time, which means that when you have to go farm it, it's a little bit easier. Second place here is we have the resource raid, experience, and gold. I highly recommend pushing until you are on at least stage 7 for experience. It's the best bang for your buck in the early game, if you can get there. Of course, once you're able to get to the stage 8, which I just recently unlocked and am able to get at 100%, then of course you want to farm stage 8. But as you can see, recommended BP of 120 to 615, so it is a pretty big jump, so don't be mad if you're not able to get to stage 8. That is perfectly fine to farm on stage 7. Gold raid, effectively, this is not worth your time, and the reason is because this energy is better used towards farming for gear, having the chance to get good gear, and then also being able to generate gold while selling that gear. But occasionally there might be a situation where you have, maybe an hour to finish a Tales of the Smith event, and you need gold quickly, and this is the place to do it. Of course, you don't want to farm anywhere lower than stage 7, and you don't want to do either of these without their respective boost. So right now, for example, I have an experience boost for another 2 hours. I do not have a gold boost. So if I wanted to farm gold right now, I would want to have a gold boost running. Anyways, that is enough of those two. The two that I really want to discuss are the gear raids and the artifact material raid. And it is my personal opinion that you want to farm whatever you're able to farm at the highest difficulty. And that's kind of an overarching idea. And the reason is because you're going to be able to have better chances at getting higher quality gear. So for example, right now, if we go over here to our events, you'll see here that we currently have a Vault in the Sands event. And I think this is the perfect time to show this off, because you'll see I barely farmed this event. I got my pyro shards, I got to the 75 diamonds, and I stopped. My reasoning for this is because A, the person in my bracket at the time that I stopped was already sky high. He already had like 7k points. I knew I wasn't going to have a chance to win. The secondary reason is because for Gear Raid 2, I'm currently only able to do stage 18. And because of that, I'm not able to get any of these really cool extra pieces, right? I'm not able to get Invigoration or Ageless Wrath. And because of that, it kind of feels bad to spend my energy there when I could spend my energy in either Gear Raid 1 or Gear Raid 3 or even the Artifact Material Raid and get high quality gear and, progression in those departments. So unless there is a crazy event going on where you have to farm a specific thing with really good rewards, you really don't want to push in a dungeon that you don't have at a very high tier. There are, of course, exceptions. For example, we have this new event coming out here, the Forgotten Palace, which is a Gear Raid 3. So because Gear Raid 3 is coming out, you're going to get access to more of these shards, more summons, more diamonds. And so because of that, when this event is out, and this goes the same for every other event, say you have all of the dungeons farming at 18, you will want to sit down and farm whatever the dungeon is that is equivalent. And the reason is because you're going to have to farm that dungeon eventually anyways. You might as well do it where you're going to get some freebies along with farming it. But of course, still follow that same rule of if you have a higher capable dungeon, you might want to farm that instead, like I've been doing currently. I'm not farming Gear Raid 2, I've been farming 1, 3, and AMR, because it's just more value for me at the moment. Then I want to go into a sort of secondary thing, and that is when you're in the early game, which dungeon should you focus on? And this seems like it's a probably pretty basic answer, and it's like, oh, go whichever dungeon you have the better champs for. That's not necessarily false. However, I think that there is a little more involved and a little trick that I want to give you guys, especially if you're in that early stage of the game, and that involves Gear Raid 1. Now, if you don't understand how gear works in this game, I'll give you a quick synopsis. We'll show you some of the gear I have on my champions. You'll come over here and you will see on the left side, I have a base stat of flat attack with 4 substats. If we go to our chest, I have flat HP and our substats. And if I go through all of my chests, you will see that all of them have one thing in common, and that is that they have flat HP. Same thing goes for my weapons. All of them have flat attack as the main stat. If I come over to my right side, that's not the case. You'll see here I have crit rate percent. I have crit rate percent here too, but I also then have attack percent. I have healing effect. I have crit damage. So the difference here between your left and your right side gear is that your left side gear has less RNG to get a good piece of gear. For example, if this Calamity piece right here was it's a left side gear now, let's say assume it was a right side gear piece that had dropped, and it had all of these amazing substats, but it also still had a flat attack main stat, right? Let's assume that. This piece right here, or this piece right here, I'm sorry, that has an attack percent stat is almost certainly going to be better than one with a flat stat. And so therefore, a flat stat right piece is going to be less valuable. However, there are other situations, for example, where we have this Infernal Roar piece that has HP percent, not the greatest main stat for an Infernal Roar piece. Now, you'll see here that I did level this up, and that was specifically for a dungeon, so there are sometimes situations where niche pieces are very helpful, but ultimately, the right side is much more difficult to get a good piece of gear, because you can have the perfect substats, the wrong main stat, and that gear is probably not going to be worth much for your account. So that brings me into my tip, and that is, I highly recommend in the early game, focusing on Gear Raid 1. Now, this doesn't mean you have to focus and slam your head against farming all the way up to 19, 20, or 21. What it means is get as high as you can in Gear Raid 1 as fast as possible. If you can get to stage 13, that's great. That's when you have a chance to start seeing mythic gear. Farm 13 for a while. Get some good left side mythic gear with good substats. That will give you a ton of stats in order to push in Gear Raid 2, Gear Raid 3, and Artifact Material Raid. If you were to do the same thing with Gear Raid 2 or Gear Raid 3, it would take you a lot longer to get viable pieces, on average, of course. Some people have very good gear luck, like myself, but some people are not able to get very good pieces of gear, very quickly. It's just, that's how RNG works, right? And so because of that, Gear Raid 1 eliminates a lot of that RNG, because you don't have to fish for a good main stat, because the main stats are always constant. And again, we are still following the same rule principle, especially in the early game, of stats over sets. So if you happen to pick up a life force set that is a perfect attack like a DPS piece, right? It has got flat attack percent, crit rate, crit damage as its substats. That's fine. That's a great piece for the early game because it has all the stats you need for a DPS. It doesn't really matter what the set is. Same thing vice versa. If you have a Calamity piece that has defense, HP, defense percent, and HP percent, that's still a good piece for a tank. And that's kind of the quick tip I wanted to give is I feel like farming gear raid 1 in the early game is going to give you a ton of stats, a ton of early progression, and allow you to push into gear raid 2 and gear raid 3 because you have those left stat pieces. Another last minute piece of advice I think from here is get to 13 as fast as possible. As we talked about before, 13, and actually I think here it's 11. Ooh, it's even 10. Yeah, so actually in Gear Raid 2, it's actually stage 10. I think Gear Raid 3 is the same as well. Let's double check that. Yeah, it's stage 10 in 2 and 3. That's when you're able to get mythic gears. But if you can get to those levels where you can get mythic gear, that's going to be a game changer. It really doesn't matter what the set is. The substats realistically don't matter that much either. If you can get 3 mythic quality attack percents on a DPS, that's going to be a lot of damage. Now, of course, you do want to try and find things that have some crit rate, some attack speed, some other stats on there. But just having a mythic gear slot on the right side with a attack percent or HP percent, whatever your stat is for whatever hero you're trying to build, is going to be a huge progression in your gear. So that's kind of the real quick tip is I feel like, in terms of gear raids, Gear Raid 1 is the most value in the early game. Now that changes quite drastically once you're able to farm Gear Raid 3 at a high level, because you get access to Infernal Roar and Soulbound Arcana, and in Gear Raid 2 you get access to Invigoration and Ageless Wrath. Soulbound Arcana, Infernal Roar, and Invigoration are probably the 3 best gear sets in the game. Ageless Wrath is definitely not bad, but I think it has a little bit less potential because it's, attack is more important than crit damage. And so because of that, crit damage is not the greatest thing. I think I would rather, for most champions, have a Soulbound Arcana or a Soulbound Arcana or an Infernal Roar as the damage set on the right side. However, Invigoration is a very, very powerful piece because it gives that attack boost to the champion as well as to one other ally in range. So once you get to those abilities on stage 19, you're able to farm those, then I think Gear Raid 2 and Gear Raid 3 skyrocket in their potential because you get access to these newer sets, and you want to try to get those sets as fast as possible. Now, the last piece of advice I want to talk about here is about artifact material raid. Now, I've had a lot of people in my streams come to me and say artifact material raid is the best place to make guaranteed progress. Now, I don't disagree with that statement. However, I think there is a little bit of a precursor that is not always mentioned when it comes to that statement. And that precursor is it's guaranteed progression if you have the artifacts to level up. So when we say that there's guaranteed progression in AMR, that guaranteed progression is because of this currency right here called Mithril. Every time you run this dungeon, you are guaranteed to get 6 to 8 Mithril if you're farming stage 18, and 2 to 10 Flawless Meteorite if you're farming stage 18. Flawless Meteorite is your gear drop, right? Your gear drop has RNG on what the main stat, what the substats, what the set is. Flawless Meteorite is the same thing. When you get to 40 Flawless Meteorite, you can pull on basically a banner to get a chance at a mythic, legendary, or epic artifact. This is the RNG of this dungeon. However, the Mithril is the guaranteed progression. So for example, if we were to come over here and we were to go to my artifacts, you will see here that I have this Ancestral Teachings. It is at plus 22 of 22. I have one more ability to promote it. You'll see here that I have some extra Ancestral Teachings. And so because of that, there is guaranteed progression that is possible if I were to farm AMR. Because just by taking this up to 22 to 25 over 25 to that level 6 ability, I'm going to be gaining a bonus to the ability by going from 1 tile to 2 tiles. And the same thing goes for if I were to take, for example, this plus 16 one. If I were to take this up, that's a guaranteed 2% attack. Not only that, but it also has the guaranteed progression in stats that you get for promoting and leveling up. However, let's say that I have completely maxed out artifacts, which I'm not sure who currently has my maxed out. Let's look for it. Here we go. My Dolores, right, has my almost maxed out Ancestral Teachings. Let's assume this was 25, and I didn't have any other artifacts that were worth a darn, and I were to go farm AMR. At that point, AMR is just as RNG dependent as a gear dungeon. So my point here is to basically, I want to explain to you that farming gear is important, farming artifact is important as well, but keep in mind of what it is that your account needs, what kind of progression you're trying to make, and what progression have you already made. For example, if you can farm Gear Raid 3, Gear Raid 2, or Gear Raid 1 on stage 19, and you can only farm Artifact Material Raid on, say, stage 15, you're going to gain more progression from farming the Gear Raids on stage 19 than farming the Artifact Material Raids on 15. If you're farming stage 18 in AMR and only have start stage 18 on all 3 of the Gear Raids, you might have more success farming in AMR. Of course, ultimately, this video is going to come down to, it all depends on your account. However, I think there are some little pieces of advice that I've given you throughout this video that may help you sway you in one direction of where you should be farming with your energy, because your energy is the most important resource in the game, because that's the only way you make progress, right? But guys, I hope you liked this. Let me know down in the comments about what's your favorite place to farm, and if you agree or disagree with the statements that I've made here today. I know there's going to be a lot of hustle and bustle about this, because when we had this conversation on my stream, it was very back and forth. I don't want to say we were arguing, because we weren't. We were having a discussion, but there was some very, very serious people talking about their perspective, and I'm very interested to see what other people's perspective is on the matter. Maybe I'm an outlier in this situation, and I don't think AMR is always the best place to farm, while other people do. But guys, if you like this video, please leave a like on the video. Again, leave a comment down below with your thoughts. And if you want to see more content from me in the future, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.